some of the feathers in, not all yet. I tend to not work an entire area all at once, but I sort of do little parts and go back and forth. So at this point I wanted to do a wash of some orangey tones over that. I love the combination of these close to complementary colors, the blue-green and then the orange-red. It makes for this really stunning vibrance when you go back and forth between them. It happens with any pair of complementary colors. If you put reds next to greens, you will also get this sort of vibrating effect of the colors, because I guess your mind is trying to go back and forth between these opposites. But I love doing that for a beautiful complex tone. Okay, so really what I'm going to be doing at this point is doing a lot of back and forth of what you just saw me do. So a lot of dry brush shading of the little detailed feathers, followed by a damp, either just clear water sometimes, or else a light wash of some tone to layer some complexity of color on top of what I just did. So I'm going to be doing that back and forth. At this point I'm going to switch back to time-lapse because the technique of it is really the same as what I've just shown you, and it's just the process of filling in the rest of the feathers in this way. Gone a few times back and forth now with those feathery textures and washes, and now I'm going to take my finer tipped size 0 brush. This one has a very nice point on it still because it is fairly new, and I'm going to get the same color that I've been using, that aqua blue tone, and much more intense now though. And I'm going to add some choice shading bits, sort of the opposite of highlights, they're the deep shadow color tones, just for punctuation. Now the reason why I do that back and forth of dry brushing and washes is just like well, first of all, there's the color complexity that it adds by layering the washes like that, but there's also a textural complexity that results from doing that, because each time as I do the dry brushing phase, the lines are much more defined, the colors and the shading, right? And then each time I hit it with a wash afterwards, it diffuses that a little bit and blends it and blurs it. And then I do a subsequent layer on top of that, which builds up onto that diffuse layer now. And you just get this grade of details ranging from the most recent layer, in this case the current layer that I'm going to be doing, the topmost layer, down to the fuzzier earlier layers that you do. And you have this building up happening. I'm probably going to add a little bit of contrast color as well. I'm not just going to have this blue. Maybe a little bit of really bright orangey red as well, in some little bits of punctuation color. Layering all these colors like this gives it not quite an iridescent look, but a little bit of that feel. And in fact, when I am doing iridescent color, an iridescent sort of rendering, for example, like a pearl, like I've done in the past, or a crow's black wings, a raven's black wings, it is actually a result of a very similar thing as I'm doing here, where you take complementary colors and a whole array of colors and layer them on top of each other. And you don't layer everything over every square inch. That's part of the trick of doing this, is that you selectively layer. So in fact, if you were to look more closely at what I've got here, my orangey washes actually don't extend all the way up to these portions of the wings, or even up here. I have them concentrated on the tips and along the back side of this wing and over here as well, rather than over everything uniformly. Because if you do it over everything uniform, then you lose that sense of shifting colors. So you leave gaps, and you leave areas where your glazes are not touching the previous ones. And as a result, you get this interleaving. Oh yeah, before I was talking about the largest size painting I did, I got completely sidetracked. That happens with me. I lose my train of thought because I start wandering off onto some other topic. Anyway, I was saying that the biggest size painting that I had done way back was probably one. It's called The Darkest Night, but that was 30 by 40 inches. Like I said, that was on Strathmore. And I frequently did paintings in that time that were, if not 30 by 40, I think I only ever did that once, at least with watercolor. I did used to paint even larger than that in oils and acrylics when I was in college. I was on these giant canvases that I had to stretch myself, and I hated stretching canvases. That's another thing I'm really glad not to be doing oils and acrylics for, not having to stretch canvases. Yeah, here I'm getting sidetracked again. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the sizes. I used to frequently work in a range of, let me turn this around, get to these feathers on this side more easily. And I'm going to get my little tray out so that I don't accidentally get paint onto these areas or spill water. It's a handy little tray that I actually made myself to perfectly fit my palettes and my water. All right, yeah, so 20 by 30 inches was not uncommon for me to work in as a size back then. And in fact, when I did my tarot deck, I started that in 2004. And I actually really wanted and thought this was going to be a good idea to do them in the size of 20 by 30 inches each painting. You know how many paintings that is? That's 78 paintings at 20 by 30 inches. It's huge. I am so glad that I did not do that. Some part of my brain said that is not a good idea to do. I did them at 8.5 by 14. And in fact, even at that size, which I thought was pretty small at that time, and shrinking down the painting to an actual card size, which is, what is that? Let's see. This is a card. It's like what, 4.5 by 2.5 inches or something. Shrinking it down to a third of the size that it was painted, which to me did not seem like an unreasonable thing to do. Having worked a lot in the fantasy gaming industry at that point in my career, I was doing a lot of card art, collectible card game art, for Magic the Gathering and Warlord and Legend of Five Rings and so many others. There were so many card games then. There probably is a bunch of them still now. There were a lot of them that I was working for. I must have done card art for at least 10 different companies over the years. Anyway, those were even smaller when they were in published form. I mean, the final pieces of art for those cards, they were maybe 1.5 inches tall by 2 inches wide. They were tiny little, and yet the art directors requested a minimum art size of, it varied from one company to the next. I don't remember what all of them were. At least one company that I worked for, the minimum requested was 6 by 8. You could work much bigger than that if you want, and I frequently and usually did, just because if you work larger, you can, the piece looks better when it's shrunk down. Despite the fact that it was only going to be an inch and a half by 2, that's about twice the size of or 3 times the size of a postage stamp, just for reference. So yeah, doing art much larger than it is ultimately meant to be printed at was not an unusual concept to me. And so when I set out doing my tarot deck, I planned to make my card art much larger because I wanted the art to look really good when it was shrunk down. And myself, I am happy with how it looks, but I guess not a lot, but there are some people that complain every once in a while that the details are too hard to make out, and they actually complain about the fact that it looks like the art was done larger and shrunk down. And in fact, yes, it is, because it is impossible to do, not impossible, but it would be extremely hard to do art in my style at actual tarot card size. So 8.5 by 14 was what I settled on. And by the end of that stint, doing all those cards, I was really super glad that I had settled on that size, because it took me 4 years of painting. I mean, it wasn't constant. I painted for the deck on and off over that time. Like I said, I was doing a lot of art for card games and various other games and magazines and books and things, and I think I even started writing my first Dreamscapes book in that time period. So I had a lot of stuff going on, and the tarot was what I did in the middle of everything else. It was kind of my in-between contract paying project work, because since I had not yet signed with a publisher through choice at that stage, I was not being paid for doing that art. And so it was a labor of love, a 4-year labor of love. And it was just something that I worked on in between other projects. You know, when I would have some contract piece that I was doing, and if I was waiting for the art director to respond to me about what changes they wanted or which sketch they wanted me to proceed with, then I would do a little bit of work on one of the tarot cards instead. And you know, each one, so I mean, it averages out to, I finished a card about every 2 to 3 weeks or so. But it didn't take me 2 to 3 weeks to do each card. I mean, it only took me, I don't know, maybe 2 days, 3 days if you count, you know, the brainstorming and thinking and sketching and everything, you know, to do each card. And then I would do the actual painting over the course of probably about 20 hours per piece. So it was fun. It was fun times. Every once in a while I think, I want to do another tarot deck. I need to finish that Oracle deck that I'm working on with Phil Bricato still. That is, yes, still in the works. I know every time I post one of those pieces again, people ask me, are you still doing this? Yes, I really do want to do it. It's just, I guess, so many ideas that I want to paint, so many things that I want to do, and there's just not enough time for it all. But I will eventually. I do fully intend to. I have not abandoned that project. I've done too many pieces on it to abandon it.